When Lauren suggested hiring a babysitter, I didn't think twice. With both of us juggling demanding careers and raising two young kids, extra help sounded like the perfect solution. "Her name's Avery," Lauren had said, scrolling through her phone to show me a picture. "She's studying psychology at the university. Comes highly recommended." The girl in the photo had a bright smile and warm eyes, the kind of person kids would gravitate toward naturally. "She looks great," I'd said, and that was the end of it. The next week, Avery started. She arrived at the house early, smiling brightly as she introduced herself. She was younger than I'd expected, no more than 22. But there was something about her presence that immediately put the kids at ease. They adored her by the end of the first evening, and Lauren couldn't stop singing her praises. "She's fantastic, don't you think?" she said later that night as we got ready for bed. "So patient with the kids. I really think this is going to make things easier for us." I nodded, relieved that we'd found someone reliable. Over the next few weeks, Avery became a fixture in our home. She was there almost every evening, helping the kids with their homework, cooking dinner if we were running late, and even staying past her shift on weekends when Lauren insisted she relax with a cup of tea before heading home. I couldn't argue. She was good at what she did. The kids loved her, and Lauren seemed happy to have someone around she could talk to after a long day. If anything, I felt like I was the odd one out, coming home to find them already deep in conversation, laughing over shared stories that I wasn't part of. At first, I didn't think much of it. Avery was young and enthusiastic, and Lauren had always been warm and friendly with people. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice small things that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Like how Lauren would linger with Avery in the kitchen after dinner, their voices drifting down the hall long after I'd gone to check on the kids. Or how Avery started staying later and later, even when there was no reason to. "She just needs some guidance," Lauren said one evening when I asked why Avery had stayed past 10. "She doesn't have a lot of family, and I think she sees me as a mentor." It was a sweet sentiment, and one that sounded like Lauren, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. It wasn't just the late nights. There were other things too, things I told myself didn't matter but stuck with me anyway. Like the way Avery's smile seemed a little too familiar when she said goodbye, or the way Lauren's phone buzzed late at night and she'd swipe the screen quickly, tucking it under her pillow before rolling over to sleep. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was overthinking something harmless, but the feeling of unease only grew. One Saturday afternoon, as I watched the kids play in the backyard, I saw Lauren and Avery sitting on the patio. Lauren poured them each a cup of tea, and they leaned in close, laughing over something I couldn't hear. It was a small moment, insignificant on the surface, but it made my stomach twist all the same. There was something in their closeness, in the way Avery looked at Lauren, that didn't feel right. I shook the thought out of my head, telling myself it was nothing. Lauren was my wife of 10 years, and Avery was just a babysitter. What was there to worry about? As the days went on, the unease I tried to ignore only grew. I'd catch Lauren and Avery talking in hushed voices more often, their heads close together, smiling about something I was never privy to. They'd stop abruptly whenever I entered the room, exchanging quick glances like they'd been caught discussing something private. When I asked Lauren about it, she brushed it off with a wave of her hand. "She's just telling me about her classes. Psychology is fascinating, you know? Did you know they're studying emotional intelligence this semester?" I nodded, pretending to care, but her answer didn't sit right with me. Why the secrecy? Why the sudden closeness? Avery, for her part, always remained polite and friendly. She'd greet me cheerfully when I came home, ask about my day, and talk about how well the kids were doing. She even baked cookies one evening as a surprise for the family, winning over the kids even more. But there was something about her smile when she talked to Lauren, soft, warm, and lingering just a bit too long. I couldn't explain it, but it made my stomach knot every time I saw it. It wasn't long before Avery's shifts started extending well past the kids' bedtime. At first, it was just an hour or so. She needed help with an assignment, Lauren explained one night when I asked why Avery was still in the kitchen at 10 o'clock. Then it became 2 hours, and soon it wasn't unusual for her to leave after midnight. The kids didn't notice, of course, but I did. "Why does she stay so late?" I asked Lauren one night after Avery had gone home. "She's a babysitter, not a house guest," Lauren sighed, her expression a mix of irritation and patience, like she was explaining something obvious. She doesn't have a lot of people, Mark. She's young, and I think she feels safe here. Besides, she's helping me with some things. You don't need to worry about it. Her explanation sounded reasonable, but it didn't ease the knot in my stomach. If anything, it only made it worse. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, expecting to find the kids finishing dinner or watching TV. Instead, I walked into a house that was eerily quiet. The living room was empty, the kitchen dark. For a moment, I thought they might have gone out, but then I heard faint laughter coming from upstairs. I followed the sound, climbing the stairs carefully, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't explain. When I reached the top of the stairs, I saw the light coming from our bedroom. The door was ajar, and the laughter was clearer now. Lauren's voice, light and easy, mingled with Avery's softer tone. I hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open just enough to peek inside. What I saw made me freeze. Lauren was sitting on the edge of the bed, her hair loose around her shoulders, a glass of wine in her hand. Avery was beside her, their knees touching, their heads bent close as they whispered and giggled. Lauren's hand rested lightly on Avery's leg, her fingers idly brushing against the fabric of her jeans. It wasn't overtly inappropriate, but it felt intimate in a way that made my chest tighten. I stepped back quietly, not wanting them to notice me. My mind raced as I made my way back downstairs, trying to process what I'd just seen. It wasn't proof of anything, just a moment between two people who'd grown close, but it felt wrong. It felt like a betrayal, even if it wasn't one yet. Sitting alone in the darkened living room, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Lauren was a good person, a kind person. She wouldn't cross that line. And Avery? She was young, practically a kid. There was nothing to worry about. But no matter how many times I told myself that, the image of them together, laughing, whispering, touching, kept replaying in my mind. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lauren and Avery sitting there, so close, laughing together like they shared a secret. It was nothing overt, nothing I could point to and say, "This is wrong," but that was what made it worse. It wasn't obvious. It was creeping, subtle, just enough to make me question if I was losing my mind. The clock glowed 2:34 a.m. as I lay there in the dark, listening to Lauren's steady breathing beside me. She slept so peacefully, like she didn't have a care in the world, while my mind churned with questions I didn't dare ask out loud. The next morning, I couldn't ignore it anymore. As Lauren poured coffee in the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and watched her, searching her face for any sign of guilt or hesitation. "You and Avery seem to be spending a lot of time together," I said, keeping my tone light but my words deliberate. "She's around more than the kids need, don't you think?" Lauren didn't look up from her mug, her expression carefully neutral. "She's young, Mark. She needs guidance. It's not just about babysitting. She doesn't have anyone else, and I want to help her." "Help her with what?" I asked, trying to mask the edge in my voice. She finally looked at me, her gaze steady and unwavering. "Life. School. She's going through a lot, and I think of her as, I don't know, like a little sister, maybe. Why are you so fixated on this?" Her answer was calm, logical, even kind, but it didn't sit right with me. A little sister? That wasn't what I'd seen. "I just think it's unusual," I said carefully. "She's a babysitter, not your best friend." Lauren sighed, exasperation creeping into her tone. "You're reading into things that aren't there. I don't know why you're making this into something it's not." I let it go for the moment, not wanting to push too hard, but the tension between us lingered. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. Lauren wasn't being overly secretive, but she wasn't open either. Her phone never left her side, and I noticed she started locking the screen more often than she used to. She didn't linger with Avery as much in front of me, but when I came home from work, I'd sometimes catch them talking in low voices before they quickly changed the subject. The final straw came one Thursday evening. I'd stayed late at the office, finishing up a project, and didn't get home until almost 9. The house was dark when I arrived, except for a faint glow coming from the backyard. I stepped out onto the patio, expecting to find Lauren reading or scrolling on her phone, But the sight that greeted me stopped me in my tracks. Lauren and Avery were sitting on the outdoor couch, a bottle of wine open on the table between them. It wasn't the wine that bothered me, it was their posture. Avery was leaning into Lauren, her hand resting lightly on Lauren's thigh, while Lauren's head was tilted back, laughing at something Avery had just said. Their closeness wasn't the easy familiarity of friends. It was something else entirely, something that made my stomach churn and my fists clench at my sides. Neither of them noticed me at first, too caught up in whatever moment they were sharing. But then Lauren glanced up, her laughter dying in her throat as she saw me standing there. "Mark," she said, her voice sharp with surprise. Avery sat up quickly, her hand dropping away from Lauren's leg, but the damage was done. The image was burned into my mind. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice low but firm. I didn't want to explode, not yet, but I couldn't keep the accusation out of my tone. "Nothing," Lauren said quickly, too quickly. "We were just talking. You're home early." "Talking," I repeated, my gaze flicking between the two of them. Avery wouldn't meet my eyes. Her cheeks flushed as she fidgeted with the hem of her sweater. Lauren stood up, moving to block my view of Avery as if that would somehow erase what I'd seen. "Yes, talking," Lauren insisted. "She's had a hard week, and I was just trying to cheer her up." "What's with the interrogation?" I didn't respond right away, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what I'd walked into. My instincts told me this wasn't innocent, but I still didn't have proof. For now, I'd let it go, but the suspicion was too deep to ignore. Without another word, I turned and went inside, leaving them alone on the patio. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the way Avery's hand rested on Lauren's thigh, the way Lauren tilted her head back and laughed like she didn't have a care in the world. It wasn't normal, it couldn't be, but I still had no hard evidence, nothing concrete to confront her with. Lauren was clever, and if I went in with just suspicions, she'd spin it around, make me feel like I was the one in the wrong. I needed to know the truth before I said anything, so I decided to start digging. The next morning, I pretended everything was fine. Over breakfast, Lauren chatted about weekend plans with the kids like nothing had happened, her smile as warm and easy as ever. I forced myself to act casual, nodding at the right moments and even laughing at one of her jokes, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. While she dropped the kids off at school, I took my chance. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, unlocked, and I didn't hesitate. I wasn't proud of it. Snooping felt like crossing a line, but I couldn't ignore my gut any longer. As I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounded in my chest. Most of the texts were mundane, work-related, messages from friends, reminders about parent-teacher conferences. But then I found the thread with Avery. It started innocently enough. Reminders about her shifts, discussions about the kids, the occasional funny meme. But as I scrolled further back, the tone began to shift. The messages became more personal, more intimate. Avery confided in Lauren about her struggles at school, her loneliness, her dreams of leaving her small town behind. Lauren responded with empathy and encouragement, offering advice and support. But then there were the messages that made my stomach drop. "Last night was amazing," Avery had written a few weeks ago. "I can't stop thinking about it." Lauren's response was immediate. "Me too. You're incredible. I feel so lucky to have you in my life." My hands trembled as I stared at the screen, reading and rereading the words. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough. The closeness I'd sensed between them wasn't just in my head. It was real. And the worst part was that Lauren hadn't even tried to hide it. She'd left her phone out, unlocked, as if she didn't think I'd ever question her. I put the phone back exactly where I'd found it and sat down at the kitchen table, my mind racing. Confronting her now would be pointless. She'd deny it, twist it, make me doubt what I'd seen. I needed more than texts. I needed something undeniable, something she couldn't talk her way out of. That evening, I told her I'd be working late at the office, but instead, I parked down the street and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Just after the kids went to bed, Avery's car pulled into the driveway. I watched as she walked up to the door, carrying a bottle of wine. Lauren opened the door for her, smiling as she stepped aside to let Avery in. The curtains were drawn, and I couldn't see much from where I was parked, but I didn't need to. I already knew what was happening inside. The hours dragged by, each minute feeling like an eternity. Around midnight, the lights in the living room went out, but Avery's car was still in the driveway. My chest tightened as I imagined what might be happening behind those closed curtains. By the time Avery finally left, I was shaking with rage. I followed her car as she drove back to her apartment, staying far enough behind that she wouldn't notice. When she pulled into her parking spot, I parked a block away and waited until she went inside. Then I got out of the car and walked up to her window. The blinds were open just enough for me to see inside, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Avery was sitting on her couch, scrolling through her phone with a smile on her face. She wasn't upset or stressed or worried. She looked happy, content, like someone who didn't have a care in the world. I realized then that this wasn't just about Lauren. Avery wasn't some innocent bystander caught up in something beyond her control. She was an active participant, fully aware of what she was doing and completely unbothered by the damage she was causing. As I walked back to my car, a plan began to form in my mind. I couldn't confront Lauren yet, not until I had irrefutable proof. But Avery was another story. If I could get her to admit what was going on, I'd finally have the leverage I needed. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. Work felt like a blur, my mind spinning with everything I'd seen and read. By the time I got home, I'd already decided what I was going to do. Lauren acted as if everything was fine, the perfect wife and mother, laughing with the kids and asking me about my day. I smiles back, played the role of the oblivious husband, but inside, I was counting down the minutes until I could put my plan into action. Later that evening, I waited until Lauren was in the shower before stepping outside and calling Avery. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, Mark. What's up?" I forced a smile into my voice. "Hey, Avery. I just wanted to thank you for everything you've been doing with the kids. They really love having you around, and so does Lauren. I don't know what we'd do without you." There was a brief pause, then she laughed softly. "That's sweet of you to say. I love being around them. Your family is special." "Special, huh?" I said, my tone light but pointed. "Yeah, Lauren talks about you all the time. She really thinks the world of you." "She's amazing," Avery said quickly, almost too quickly. "I mean, you both are. It's been such a privilege to work with your family." I let the silence stretch out just long enough to make her uncomfortable before I spoke again. "Listen, Avery. I was wondering if we could talk. In person. There's something I need to ask you, and I think it'd be better if we didn't do it over the phone." "Oh," she said, her voice faltering slightly. Sure. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said smoothly. "I just need your advice on something, and I'd rather do it face to face. Are you free tomorrow afternoon? Maybe we could grab coffee." She hesitated for a moment, then agreed. "Sure. That sounds great." The next day, I met her at a small cafe on the edge of town. She was already seated when I arrived, her usual bright smile in place. "Hey, Mark," she said, waving me over. "What's on your mind?" I sat down across from her, my stomach tightening as I tried to keep my expression neutral. "Avery, I'm going to be honest with you. I know something's going on between you and Lauren." Her smile froze, her eyes widening slightly. "What are you talking about?" she said, her voice carefully controlled. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, leaning forward. "I've seen the messages, Avery. I've seen the way you two act around each other. I'm not stupid." Her face flushed, and she looked down at her coffee cup, twisting it nervously in her hands. "Mark, it's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," I said sharply. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you and my wife have been sneaking around behind my back." She didn't respond right away, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at the table. Finally, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "It's not sneaking around," she said quietly. "It's complicated." "Complicated," I repeated, my jaw tightening. "That's the best you can come up with?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We didn't plan it. It just happened. Lauren was there for me when I needed someone, and one thing led to another." I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding as I processed her words. This wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction. It was real. My worst suspicions had been confirmed, and now there was no going back. You know what the worst part is? I said, my voice cold. I trusted you. I let you into my home, into my family, and this is how you repay me? By doing this with my wife. Avery's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. We're done here, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. Stay away from my wife, and stay away from my family. Do you understand? She nodded, unable to meet my gaze. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving her sitting there alone. Walking out of that cafe, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, betrayal, and the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. Avery's confession had confirmed what I already suspected, but hearing it out loud didn't make it easier to process. If anything, it made everything worse. My own wife, the woman I had built a life with, had crossed a line I never thought possible. And now, I had to decide what to do next. When I got home, Lauren was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner like it was any other day. She looked up when I walked in, smiling warmly. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her tone cheerful. I stared at her, the same smile that had once felt like home now looking hollow and false. She didn't know what I knew, not yet, and as much as I wanted to scream, to demand answers, I forced myself to stay calm. "Yeah," I said, setting my keys on the counter. "Things at work wrapped up faster than I thought." She nodded, turning back to the cutting board. "Good timing. Dinner will be ready soon. The kids are upstairs, finishing their homework." I leaned against the counter, watching her. How many times had I stood in this exact spot, thinking we were a normal, happy family? How many times had I trusted her implicitly, never questioning the late nights, the phone notifications, the time spent with Avery? My jaw tightened as I fought the urge to confront her right then and there. But not yet. I needed to handle this carefully. The next few days were excruciating. I played my role as the oblivious husband, smiling and nodding as Lauren went about her routine, acting like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was unraveling. Every interaction felt like a performance. Every glance she gave me a reminder of how easily she had lied. I started noticing more. How she always seemed to have her phone within arm's reach. How she disappeared into the backyard to take calls. How her laugh seemed forced when she thought I was watching. I couldn't take it anymore. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat her down in the living room. She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern, her head tilted slightly. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Lauren, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me." Her expression shifted, a flicker of something, nervousness, maybe, crossing her face before she masked it. "Okay," she said cautiously. "What's going on with you and Avery?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the tension coiled in my chest. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered, shaking her head. "What do you mean? Nothing's going on. She's just the babysitter, Mark." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice hardening. "I know about the texts. I know about the wine nights. I know what you've been doing when you think I'm not watching." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked genuinely shaken, her composure slipping. "Mark, don't," I said sharply, cutting her off. "I don't want excuses. I want the truth. How long has this been going on?" Tears filled her eyes, and she looked away, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "It's not what you think," she whispered. "Then tell me what it is," I demanded, leaning forward. "Because right now, it looks like you've been sneaking around with a 22-year-old babysitter behind my back." Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said quietly. "It started out innocent. I was just helping her, giving her advice, being there for her. But it got complicated. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been preparing for this, but hearing her admit it still felt like a betrayal I wasn't ready for. "How far, Lauren?" I asked, my voice low. "How far did it go?" She hesitated, tears streaming down her face. We kissed, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. And there were a few nights where it went further than that. But it's over now. I swear, it's over. I stared at her, the weight of her confession settling over me like a heavy blanket. My hands trembled as I clenched them into fists, fighting the urge to explode. Do you even realize what you've done? I asked, my voice trembling with rage. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. And for what? For her. Mark, please, she sobbed, reaching for me. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But I love you. I love our family. Please, don't let this ruin everything we've built. I stood up, her touch feeling foreign and unwelcome. You already ruined it, Lauren, I said coldly. You made your choice. Now I have to make mine. I walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing on the couch. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I spent that night in the guest room, staring at the ceiling and replaying everything Lauren had said. Her words echoed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. She loved me? She loved our family? If that were true, how could she have done this? I wanted to scream, to cry, to let all the anger and hurt pour out, but I stayed silent, the weight of it pressing down on me like a boulder. The next morning, Lauren was quiet. She didn't try to talk to me, didn't attempt to explain herself further. It was like she knew there was nothing she could say to fix what she'd done. The kids noticed the tension, their eyes darting between us as we sat at the breakfast table in near silence. I forced myself to smile, to act normal for their sake, but it felt hollow. I left the house earlier than usual, driving aimlessly for a while before pulling into a coffee shop. I sat in the parking lot, sipping a cup of black coffee and trying to make sense of what to do next. Divorce seemed inevitable, but the thought of tearing our family apart made my stomach churn. The kids didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve to lose the stability we'd built for them, even if that stability had been a lie. But then there was Avery. The thought of her made my blood boil. She wasn't innocent in this. She knew Lauren was married, knew what she was doing, and she'd gone along with it anyway. I couldn't let her walk away from this unscathed. If she thought she could ruin my family and get away with it, she was dead wrong. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. I wanted to know my options, what a divorce would look like, how custody would work, and most importantly, how to protect myself and the kids from whatever fallout was coming. The lawyer was calm and professional, walking me through the process step by step. Do you have evidence? She asked. Anything that proves the infidelity? I do, I said, my jaw tightening. Texts, photos, even a confession. Good, she said. That'll make things easier. But I'd recommend keeping things as amicable as possible for the kids' sake. The less messy this gets, the better. I nodded, even though I knew keeping things amicable would be easier said than done. Lauren wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and if Avery was involved, things could get even more complicated. When I got home that evening, Lauren was waiting for me in the living room. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red and puffy, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Mark, can we talk? She asked, her voice trembling. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed over my chest. Talk about what? I asked coldly. You've already said everything I need to hear. Please, she said, her voice breaking. I know I hurt you, but I can't lose you. I can't lose our family. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Fix this? Lauren, you can't fix this. You can't undo what you did. You made your choice. I was stupid, she said, tears streaming down her face. I wasn't thinking. I got caught up in something that wasn't real. But you and the kids, you're my everything. Please, Mark, give me a chance to make this right. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she meant every word, that she truly regretted what she'd done. But how could I? How could I trust her again after everything she'd done? I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Time to figure out what's best for me and the kids. Right now, I don't even know if I can look at you without feeling betrayed. She nodded, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Take all the time you need, she whispered. Just please don't give up on us. I walked past her without another word, heading upstairs to check on the kids. They were my priority now, protecting them, giving them a sense of stability in the chaos that Lauren had created. Whatever came next, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let her mistake destroy them. The next few days were tense and silent. Lauren gave me space, just as I had asked, but it didn't make anything easier. We moved around the house like ghosts, careful not to cross paths unless absolutely necessary. The kids sensed something was wrong, and I hated that. I hated that they had to be caught in the middle of this mess when none of it was their fault. I focused on them as much as I could. I made sure their routines stayed the same, that they went to school on time, that homework got done, and that bedtime stories were still part of the night. But even as I read to them, my mind kept drifting back to the reality I was living in. How could I shield them from something so devastating when I barely knew how to handle it myself? Lauren tried a few times to reach out, but I shut her down each time. Not now, I'd say, my tone flat, and she'd back off, retreating to another part of the house. But one evening, after the kids had gone to bed, she cornered me in the kitchen. "Mark, we can't keep doing this," she said, her voice quiet but firm. I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Doing what?" "This, whatever this is," she said, gesturing between us. "The silence, the avoidance. We need to talk about what happens next." "What happens next?" I repeated bitterly. "You tell me, Lauren. You're the one who broke us. What do you think happens next?" She flinched at my words, her eyes filling with tears. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I don't want to lose you, Mark. I don't want to lose our family. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat on me with the babysitter," I snapped. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't regret them. She took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she clasped them in front of her. "You're right. I should have. I was selfish and stupid, and I let myself get caught up in something that wasn't real. But Mark, I love you. I've always loved you. Please don't throw everything away because of my mistake." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. "You don't get it, do you? You're the one who threw it away. You didn't just make a mistake, Lauren. You destroyed the trust we built over 10 years. How am I supposed to believe you when you say you love me? How am I supposed to trust you again?" Her tears spilled over, and she wiped them away quickly. "I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I'm sorry, that I'll never make a mistake like this again. Please, Mark, just tell me what to do." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the texts, the nights spent together, the lies she told me so effortlessly, and the pity vanished. "I don't know if there's anything you can do," I said honestly. "Right now, I just need to focus on the kids and figure out what's best for them. That's all that matters to me." She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I understand," she said softly. I hope you'll give me a chance to fix this." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and left the room, heading to the guest room that had become my makeshift bedroom. I closed the door behind me and sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. As much as I wanted to hate her, I couldn't. Part of me still loved her, still clung to the life we had built together. But the pain of her betrayal was too fresh, too raw to ignore. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for certain. Things would never be the same again. The days stretched into weeks, and though the surface of our lives remained intact, the cracks beneath it widened with every passing moment. Lauren tried harder. I'll give her that. She threw herself into parenting, cooking elaborate meals, volunteering for school events, and making sure the house looked perfect. But none of it mattered. Her efforts felt desperate, a flurry of actions meant to distract from the one thing she couldn't undo. And no matter how hard she tried, I couldn't forget the betrayal. I spent most of my time focusing on the kids. They were my anchor in the chaos, the reason I got out of bed every morning. I started taking them to school, helping with homework, and planning fun activities on weekends. If anything, the situation had made me more present in their lives, but it didn't erase the tension at home. They asked questions sometimes. "Why are you and Mom fighting?" Or, "When will things go back to normal?" But I didn't have good answers for them. I hated seeing the worry in their eyes, hated knowing that my silence only made them feel more uncertain. One evening, after I'd tucked them into bed, I went to the garage. It had always been my space, a place where I could clear my head while working on small projects or fixing things around the house. But that night, I just stood there, staring at the workbench without really seeing it. My mind was elsewhere, replaying every moment of the past few weeks, every argument, every conversation, every tearful plea from Lauren. I didn't hear her come in until she spoke. "Mark," she said softly, her voice cutting through the silence. I turned to see her standing in the doorway, her arms crossed over her chest. She looked tired, worn down, like she hadn't slept in days. "What is it, Lauren?" I asked, my tone flat. "I know you don't want to talk to me," she said, stepping into the garage, "but I can't keep living like this. I need to know where we stand." "Where we stand," I repeated, leaning back against the workbench. "That's funny, because from where I'm standing, things look pretty damn broken." Her face crumpled, but she didn't look away. "I know I broke us," she said, her voice trembling. "I know I hurt you in a way I can never take back. But Mark, I can't give up on us. I won't give up on us." "Maybe you should," I said bitterly, "because I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again. Every time I see you, all I can think about is what you did. The lies, the sneaking around. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I think about it every day, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I let you down, that I hurt you, that I put our family in jeopardy. But I love you, Mark. I love our kids. I don't want to lose what we have." "What we had," I corrected her. "We don't have anything anymore, Lauren. Not trust, not honesty, not a real marriage." Her shoulders shook as she sobbed quietly, but she didn't leave. "Then tell me how to fix it," she whispered. "Tell me what I can do to make this right." "You can't," I said, my voice harsh but honest. "You can't undo what you did. You can't erase the nights you spent with her, the lies you told me, the way you threw away everything we built together." She stepped closer, her hands outstretched like she wanted to touch me but thought better of it. "Please, Mark," she begged. "I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. Just please don't give up on me." I stared at her, my chest tight with a mix of anger and sorrow. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to believe that we could somehow rebuild what we'd lost. But the other part of me knew that forgiveness wouldn't be enough. The damage was too deep, the trust too shattered. "I need time," I said finally. "I need time to figure out what I want, what's best for me and the kids. And you need to figure out why you did this. Because until you understand that, there's no point in even trying." She nodded, wiping her tears away. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said quietly. "I just hope you'll give me the chance to prove it." I didn't respond. Instead, I turned back to the workbench, picking up a wrench and pretending to focus on something in front of me. I heard her leave a moment later, the soft click of the door closing behind her. As I stood there in the empty garage, the weight of everything pressed down on me. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. In the days that followed, I started making decisions, not grand, sweeping ones, but small steps toward clarity. I couldn't live in limbo forever, and the weight of the situation was too much to bear without some kind of plan. My first priority was the kids. I wanted to protect them from the fallout of what was happening, to give them a sense of normalcy even as the foundation of their home life shifted beneath them. Lauren kept her distance, respecting the space I'd asked for. She went through the motions of our daily routines, but the spark in her had dimmed. Every so often, I'd catch her watching me with a look I couldn't quite place, part regret, part desperation. I knew she was waiting for me to say something, to give her some indication of what I was thinking, but I wasn't ready to give her that. Not yet. I took the kids to the park one Saturday morning, just the three of us. It was a crisp, sunny day, and their laughter filled the air as they raced around the playground. Watching them run and climb and play without a care in the world, I felt a pang of guilt. They didn't know what was happening, not really, and I hated that the choices Lauren and I had made, her betrayal, my silence, would inevitably impact them. "Daddy, push me higher," my youngest called from the swing set. His face lit up with pure joy. I smiled and obliged, pushing him higher and higher until his giggles echoed across the park. For a moment, I let myself forget everything, focusing only on the sound of his laughter and the crisp breeze on my face. But the moment didn't last. When we got home, Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked up as we walked in, her smile strained but genuine. "Did you have fun?" she asked, her voice tentative. The kids answered for me, chattering excitedly about the park and the games they'd played. I nodded, letting their voices fill the room as I put my keys on the counter. Lauren watched me closely, her eyes searching for something. Acknowledgement, forgiveness, anything. But I avoided her gaze. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, Lauren knocked on the door of the guest room. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling mindlessly through my phone, and for a moment, I considered ignoring her. But then I sighed and called out, "Come in." She opened the door hesitantly, stepping inside and closing it behind her. "Mark," she said softly, her hands clasped in front of her. "I know you're tired of hearing me say I'm sorry, but I don't know what else to do. I need to know if there's a chance for us, if you can ever forgive me." I put my phone down and looked at her, my chest tightening at the sight of her standing there, so small and vulnerable. "Lauren, I don't know," I said honestly. "I want to say yes. I want to believe we can move past this. But right now, I don't know if that's possible." She nodded, her lips trembling as tears filled her eyes. "I understand," she said, her voice breaking, "but I'm not going to stop trying, Mark. I'm not going to give up on us." "I'm not asking you to give up," I said quietly, "but I need you to understand that forgiveness isn't something I can just give. It's going to take time, and even then, it might not be enough." She wiped at her eyes, her expression determined despite her tears. "I'll wait as long as it takes," she said. "I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't respond, and after a moment, she turned and left the room. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling as her words echoed in my mind. She was willing to wait, to fight for our marriage, but I wasn't sure if I had the strength to meet her halfway. As the days passed, I started to realize something. This wasn't just about Lauren and what she'd done. It was about me, about whether I could let go of the anger and pain, whether I could rebuild the trust that had been shattered. And the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could. The following weeks passed in a blur. I focused on work, the kids, and anything that could distract me from the heavy decisions that loomed over my life. But no matter how busy I kept myself, the nights always came. The silence of the house, the creak of the floorboards, the faint sounds of Lauren moving around. It all reminded me that this wasn't over, that something had to give. Lauren was trying. She really was. She left me notes in the mornings, little reminders that she cared. "I hope you have a good day," one read. Another said, "Thank you for taking the kids to soccer practice. It means so much to them." She wasn't pushing me, but the notes felt like soft nudges, subtle attempts to rebuild the connection she'd severed. I kept them, not because I was ready to forgive her, but because I wasn't ready to throw them away. One evening, I decided to go through some of the photos on my phone. There were so many moments I'd forgotten. Family vacations, birthdays, lazy Sunday afternoons in the backyard. The smiles, the laughter, the warmth. It all felt so distant now, like a life that belonged to someone else. But as I scrolled, I came across a photo I didn't remember taking. It was of Lauren and the kids, sitting on the couch. She was reading to them, her face lit with the kind of joy that used to make me fall in love with her all over again. I stared at the photo for a long time, my chest tightening. It wasn't that I'd forgotten how much I loved her. It was that I didn't know if love was enough. That weekend, I decided to take the kids out for the day. Lauren offered to come along, but I told her it would just be the three of us. She didn't argue, just nodded and said, "Have fun." Her smile was small, and I could see the disappointment in her eyes, but she didn't press the issue. We went to the zoo, walking through the winding paths and watching the kids marvel at the animals. They laughed and pointed, asking a million questions about the lions, the giraffes, the penguins. For a few hours, it felt like everything was normal again, like the weight of the past few months had lifted. But as we walked back to the car, my oldest looked up at me and said, "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to get divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I stopped in my tracks, staring down at him as my mind raced for an answer. "Why do you ask that, buddy?" I said, kneeling down to his level. He shrugged, looking at his shoes. "You don't talk to her like you used to, and you sleep in the guest room now. It feels different." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Mommy and I are going through a tough time right now," I said gently. "But we both love you, and your brother very much. That's never going to change, okay?" He nodded, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I hugged him tightly, wishing I could give him more reassurance, but I didn't want to make promises I wasn't sure I could keep. When we got home, Lauren was waiting in the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw us walk in. "How was it?" she asked, her voice warm. "Good," I said shortly, helping the kids take off their jackets and shoes. She hesitated, glancing at me like she wanted to say something, but then she turned to the kids, asking them about their favorite animals. I watched her for a moment, wondering how she could seem so normal, so unaffected, when everything felt like it was falling apart. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I found myself standing outside her door. It was late, and I could hear the faint sound of her moving around inside. For a moment, I considered knocking, but then I turned and walked back to the guest room. I wasn't ready. Not yet. A few more weeks passed, and the weight of everything seemed to settle into a strange rhythm. The house was quieter, the days blurred together, and Lauren and I existed in the same space, but on different wavelengths. She kept trying, making the kids' favorite meals, asking how my day was, leaving those notes that still piled up on my nightstand. I knew she wanted to bridge the gap between us, but I wasn't sure if that bridge could even be rebuilt. One evening, I sat in the guest room, staring at the divorce papers I'd printed out weeks ago but hadn't signed. They felt heavy in my hands, like they carried the weight of a decade of memories, both good and bad. A part of me wanted to sign them and move on, to cut ties and start fresh. But another part of me hesitated, holding on to the life we'd built together, the love we once had, the family we were trying to protect. I thought about the kids, their laughter, their innocent questions about why things weren't the same anymore. They didn't understand the complexity of what was happening, and I hated the thought of them growing up in a broken home. But I also knew staying in a marriage filled with resentment wouldn't do them any favors either. That night, I sat Lauren down at the kitchen table. She looked at me with cautious hope, like she was bracing herself for whatever I was about to say. "We need to talk," I began, my voice steady but firm. She nodded, folding her hands on the table. "Okay," she said softly. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," I said, choosing my words carefully. "About us, about the kids, about what's best for everyone." Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent, waiting for me to continue. "I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I used to," I admitted. "What you did, it broke something in me, in us, and I don't know if it's something we can ever fully repair." She nodded slowly, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I know," she whispered. "I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right, Mark. I'll do whatever it takes." I took a deep breath, looking down at the table. "The truth is, I don't know if I'm ready to give up on us," I said quietly. "Not yet. But if we're going to try, things have to change. We need counseling, real counseling, not just talking in circles around each other. We need to rebuild this from the ground up, and it's going to take time. A lot of time." Her breath hitched, and she wiped her tears away quickly. "I'll do it," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just tell me what you need from me." "I need honesty," I said firmly. "No more lies, no more secrets. If I'm going to even try to forgive you, I need to know that I can believe you." "You can," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "I swear, Mark, I'll never lie to you again." For the first time in weeks, I felt a small flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. It was faint, barely there, but it was enough to make me consider the possibility of rebuilding what we'd lost. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, anger, moments where it felt impossible to move forward. But for the sake of the kids, for the sake of the life we'd built together, I was willing to try. As we sat there in the quiet kitchen, the weight between us felt a little lighter. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. And sometimes, a start is all you need.